What I learned from Derral Eves, executive producer of the hit TV show The Chosen, and his chief operating officer, when I met with them and I got to sit down with them and ask them questions and I got to see a presentation by them, what I learned from them that is so powerful and how they communicate their message to customers and what we can learn from them. You know, when someone is selling from stage and at the end, the audience gets up and rushes to the back of the room to buy? That's a table rush. My name is Mischa Z, and the Table Rush Talk Show is all about bringing you the tools, strategies, and tactics that you can use to grow your audience and inspire them to buy. So what I learned from Derral Eves and his president of operations when I got to chat with them at Mastermind in Paradise and see Derral Eves give a presentation, and then I got to talk to his president of operations a bunch. I was sitting at the same table with his president of operations. I wish I could remember his name right now. But yeah, here we go. Of course, as I've talked about a bunch on the last 4 or 5 episodes, I was at Mastermind in Paradise in Mexico, Russell Brunson's Mastermind in Paradise, and Derral Eves was there. For anybody who doesn't know Derral Eves, he is the executive producer of the hit TV show The Chosen. So Derral executive produced that show. He used all his social media influence and prowess and skills to get that to be one of the biggest crowd-funded, one of the biggest watched shows in history. I'm not sure of the exact metrics, but unless you've been under a rock, you've heard about or seen or perhaps even watched The Chosen. And yeah, so Derral was the marketing muscle behind that. And Derral Eves wrote a book called The YouTube Formula. Derral Eves has worked with Mr. Beast. Anybody, I mean, you listening right now have to have heard of Mr. Beast. I mean, didn't Mr. Beast turn down $1 billion at this point? Somebody offered him $1 billion for his YouTube channel, and he said no. It's at least worth 15 billion and or something like that. And you know, he started a chocolate bar, and all of a sudden, you know, is selling more chocolate bars than Hershey's. So Derral works with Mr. Beast. Derral has helped so many people be successful on YouTube, and Derral's been in the game for a long time. And so Derral gave a presentation at Mastermind in Paradise, and I was walking to the farewell dinner at Mastermind in Paradise, and at the farewell dinner, you're basically mingling with the who's who of, you know, Russell's inner circle. You're having an opportunity to say hi and chat, and I was literally walking to the dinner, and next, you know, I'm walking next to Derral, and so I start chatting with Derral and asking him a few questions, and Derral was amazingly open and chatty, and it was great. And I asked him some questions, and what did I have in my notes here? Let's see, I bumped into him walking in. Oh, and I wrote, I asked him a stupid question. And it actually may have been a good question, but then wasn't the time. We didn't really have time to go deep and what I was asking him. And actually now I'm also reading his book, which is amazing. So I would have even more questions for him. I got to tell you that this YouTube formula is very well written. I'm 2 chapters in. I just started chapter 3. And the first 2 chapters were basically a brief history of YouTube. And it's very fascinating, very well written, very captivating. And Derral's a great storyteller. But what I want to talk about here is what Derral and his president do so well? So as president of operations, so I get my food at the farewell dinner. There's a couple hundred people, networking, mingling, talking, having fun. Some people are drinking some cocktails, what have you. Photographers are running around, videographers are running around. It's just super fun. So I sit down to eat my dinner. It's open tables. A couple of tables were reserved. I believe Russell always has a reserved table. But I sit down and I literally sit next to Derral's president of operations. So this is the thing that I learned from Derral and his president of operations. I wish I knew his president of operations name, but in Derral's presentation, Derral just told success story after success story after success story about his customers, who he helps, who he has helped and helps grow and have success on YouTube. Literally everything he talked about was related to a customer of his, a client of his, who he helped. And it was crazy. And he's very good at the way he does it. Who else is great at this is Stu McLaren. Should Google Stu McLaren, subscribe to Stu McLaren's newsletter, his email list. Stu McLaren does membership sites, but Stu McLaren's same way. Just every question he answers, every analogy he has, everything he teaches you, he's relating it to successes that his students have had. Now, I would say that Derral's a little more in your face with it, where Stu's a little more subtle, and different strokes for different folks, right? And clearly people resonate with Stu, and clearly people resonate with Derral. So what was so powerful about this, and about what I noticed about Derral, Derral's talking about the power of YouTube, but also about how he's helped his clients and students. He's talking about it through that lens. And so anybody watching or talking to him is going to be thinking, I need that. I need help or I want that. Right? Does that make sense? And so I sit down, I start rapping with his president or his chief operating officer. That might have actually been his official title as COO. But now I have a captive audience with Derral Eves, executive producer. I'm practicing name dropping right now of The Chosen, and best-selling author of The YouTube Formula, How Anyone Can Unlock the Algorithm to Drive Views, Build an Audience, and Grow Revenue. And actually the forward is by Mr. Beast himself, Jimmy Donaldson. Anyway, I sit down, I'm talking to him and to his COO, and I start asking him questions about what they do. And he is literally relating everything that I ask him, every question that I ask him, he's relating to their customer success stories and their client success stories, their student success stories. Every question, it was crazy. So I consciously, strategically started asking Derral's COO questions on, let's see how far away I can, let's see if I can ask him a question that he won't answer with the customer success story. God bless him. It was amazing. So I started asking about, I can't even remember. I wish I could remember the questions, but he was so gifted at reframing it to around his clients and their success. So if I'd say, well, tell me about, podcasting in relation to YouTube, he'd say, well, one of our clients, Mr. Blankety Blank, who we helped grow his channel from 1,000 subscribers to 500,000 subscribers. I mean, it was crazy. So that's what I learned. Well, let me tell you what I learned. I'm going to be more specific. What I learned is, and what it reinforced is, we've got to learn our customer success stories and tell them in our stories and get better at telling our customer success stories to answer people's questions about what we do. Working it into our stories, working it into our frameworks, giving, it's just so powerful. Again, Stu McLaren was doing it, and and not everybody does this. Not everybody has to do this, but I just saw the power of it. And Derral Eves is crushing right now. He's crushing it right now. And what was the other thing I was going to say? Some contempt I had. I'll get to that. But Stu McLaren is crushing right now. But so Derral is obviously crushing right now with the success of The Chosen, and he's helped people get. Derral Eves is responsible for like 80 billion views. No joke, 80 billion views on YouTube and another 60 billion views on Instagram, Facebook, Reels and things like that. It's just crazy. The numbers are mind-boggling. But in my notes, that's right. Here's what I had in my notes, the contempt I had. So, I also wanted to say Derral is a very compelling character. I probably should have started with this. I'm looking at my notes right now, and I totally didn't reference my notes in order. So I'm off grid. I've gone off grid, but I wrote Derral is a compelling character. And I noticed that every point he made it with a customer case study. There we go. Derral Eve spoke at Funnel Hacking Live, and I must in my notes here. And I missed his FHL presentation. I was probably going to the bathroom or something. And so we all got his book at Funnel Hacking Live. And so I'd kind of had a little bit of contempt prior to investigation with Derral. I don't know why. I don't know where that comes from in me sometimes, where I'll prejudge somebody and the success they're having and perhaps what I can learn from them. And I'll prejudge them by maybe how they look or whatever. But Derral's a very compelling character. When he was on stage at MIP, at Mastermind in Paradise, you are drawn into him, or I was drawn into him. I was like, oh yeah, this guy's good at what he does, and he is a compelling character. So next thing you know, as I already said in this episode, I'm walking to dinner, and I'm walking by him, and I get a chance to say hi, introduce myself. Next thing you know, I'm sitting at dinner with his chief operating officer, and I get to start peppering him with questions, and I actually got up and left. I could have stayed. Derral sat down too. So Derral was there. His chief operating officer was there. His wife, Derral's wife, they're all sitting there having dinner, and I thought I'd give him a break and let other people talk to him. But that's what I've got for you. Let's all get better at telling our customer stories, our customer case studies, and what we do. I can help you get your customer stories and case studies as well. That's what I do. I interview your customers and get their amazing stories. So you have in detail what happened for them. What's their customer story arc? What was their pain? How miserable was their life and what they did before they met you? And then they met you and their life changed. And now they're having success in some arena. Perhaps they're making more money. Perhaps they're emotionally more stable. Perhaps you've got them shinier teeth. But that's what I do. And then I also help them. I isolate the objections, right? So many of our customers have objections. And so I get your customers to tell what their objections were from buying services like the ones they bought from you, and how it turns out their objections were unfounded. Okay, Go to testimonialguy.com for more, testimonialguy.com for more. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Table Rush Talk Show. For resources to help you sell your stuff, go to belove.media/resources. That's belove.media/resources. And be sure to subscribe, comment, 5-star, and share. Thank you again for listening.